Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, a young man who beat the odds to become a professional football player, only to have that dream suddenly shattered.
Everybody was just excited about the win. There was a lot of people in there. It was a packed club. I froze and I looked around and I'm like, who the hell is shooting in Calgary? Like, who has a gun? That's when I see him shoot 2 more shots. So I see him go bang. I look, I see Mylan stumbling by me.
We actually catch a glimpse of the suspect running with what clearly looks like a handgun in his hand back to the vehicle.
One of them, which was a recycling bin, I flipped open, and the very top was a lighting box. I kind of took my light, looked down at an angle, and sure enough, I can see the ribbing on what I would consider the slide of the gun. It
was like a scene out of a movie. Like, it was so surreal. Like, I have nightmares about that.
To a degree, I'm a father figure because I'm an old man on the team, so I lost a son today.
And guys, for Mylan, hit the on button. I heard you guys say it. He had an on button. Go hit the on button, and it's game time. Family, on 3. 1, 2, 3, family.
Mylan has walked the streets of Detroit for years and never had a fiery dart thrown at him to the point where it cost him his life.
That particular night, he just ran to the devil.
Here's Nancy Hicks with Blindsided, the story of Mylan Hicks.
In the fall of 2016, the Canadian Football League season was well underway, and the Calgary Stampeders were on fire. Their game on September 24th of that year was particularly important.
So it was a lot on the line. It was a lot of history on the line. It was a lot of pride on the line. There was a lot of bragging rights. So the game was super significant. It was a tough game too.
Derek Dennis is a former NFLer and a CFL All-Star player. In 2016, he was an offensive lineman for the Stampeders, the team most fans simply call the Stamps.
It was 2 of the top teams in the West Division. It was us and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and we were playing for first place in the West Division. Both of us were coming in off of win streaks. I'll never forget that game for a multitude of reasons, because it's probably one of the biggest games of my career and probably one of the biggest days of my life in the sense of what occurred that day.
This story begins across the U.S. border in Detroit, Michigan. That's where Mylan Hicks was born and raised.
Here in Detroit, it's a beautiful place. It has its segments of crime like any other place, but it also has its segments of, oneness, togetherness, community, where people look out for one another.
Mylan was the middle child of 5 siblings.
I was pretty stern in raising my children. They weren't allowed to just roam the streets. I had to know where they were.
Like my mom and his mom, they were on us from the beginning since we were little. Like, oh, you can go here, you can't go there. Watch who you around, watch who you talk to, don't talk to strangers. We definitely took care of each other. From
the time Mylan could walk, he had a drive that was unstoppable.
He had no fear. His tenacity was excellent. He wasn't a quitter. He just kept moving from place to place. At the age of 3, he was riding a 2-wheeler. He blew my mind. I came home from work. He had a little bike with training wheels. I don't know who he convinced to remove the training wheels, but he come down the street, this big old head and some little shorts and no shirt. I got out the car, I was like, is that my child? Then I realized he was flying. He did everything fast. So I think it started there. I think the realization that he was just a real fearless individual, would champion anything he set his sights on, that he was a go-getter.
Growing up, Mylan was interested in every sport imaginable.
But we put him in everything in order for him to carve out his best. Come to find out, it was all his best. the crowd would just cheer him on, and I would look around in awe. They was just rooting, Mylan, Mylan. And I think that just did him in. He would just score a touchdown, and he always had this, you know, after he did it, little fat fingers, and he'd run back across the field. Yeah, he was an amazing kid.
Mylan shared his hopes and dreams with his closest friends.
The exact same dream. Like, we talked about going to the NFL basically our whole life, like throughout high school, just dominating the game in high school, then getting to the next level in college and actually winning a couple of Big Ten championships, Rose Bowl championship, Cotton Bowl championship, just being a part of an amazing program to seek the next step, which is the NFL, and that was our journey.
For Mylan, he just wanted to better himself. Not that he had it bad, but he saw more. He saw that he wanted more, and he wanted more for his family. So I think those aspirations there, you know, they sparked a fire underneath him.
But his first few years at Michigan State University were plagued with injuries.
He sat on the sideline and he perfected his game, and he watched other people moves. And I remember one time, he wasn't talking to me, but I heard him talking to someone, and he was saying, it ain't so bad on the sideline because everybody revealed they mess out there, and I pick up on it. So when I do get out there, I already know they moves because I've studied them, you know. So he took a bad and made a good out of it.
By his senior year, Mylan won the award for Most Inspirational Player.
I actually graduated in psychology this summer.
How'd you feel about that?
I mean, it was a great accomplishment. Of course, my parents was happy, and I just feel like it was another achievement that or another goal I knocked off in my life. And of course, I went through my hard times here, but you know, my testament to my parents and my faith in God. You know, I just try to stay hungry, and quitting wasn't an option for me.
Mylan's dream to go pro was a bit of a roller coaster. He got calls from a few NFL teams, but nothing panned out until the San Francisco 49ers signed him to their practice roster.
And he went out there and he was happy. He loved the weather, he loved the ambiance, he said he loved the people. He just did not love not being on the, having cracked the team yet. But he was willing to try. So they got rid of whatever their process is. He made it through almost to the end, and then he got cut. And that's where the backup plan come from, to route him through the CFL.
Mylan seized an opportunity with the Canadian Football League. He saw it as a way back to the NFL.
I didn't know much about Calgary. I just looked at Canada, not the different parts of it. I just looked at Canada as a whole, and that I had heard about Canada had always been good, had always been great. So I gave my son his blessing because he was pursuing his dream.
In May of 2016, he signed with the Calgary Stampeders as a part of the practice roster.
He knew that the steps that he was taking would lead him back to the ultimate dream, and these were just hurdles, you know, that he had to cross, but he was willing to cross them to get to where he wanted to be.
Derek Dennis knows that feeling very well because he's lived it.
Growing up here in the States, that's always been the goal for your football players to make it to the NFL, right? And the CFL has always been somewhat of a springboard for a lot of American guys to get up there, get some game time film, get something to, you know, kind of put on a resume that send it to NFL teams to get that shot that they covet. So I'm originally from Queens, New York, born and raised. Ended up being a pro football player for about 8, 9 years. Had a pretty good college career, graduated, and then went on to the NFL for 3 seasons. And then I went up to Canada around 2015, played with 2 teams, Calgary Stampeders and the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Dennis was an offensive lineman for the Stamps during the 2015 and 2016 seasons. Because Mylan was on the practice roster, he wasn't playing games, but he was still a huge part of the team.
I remember always talking about him every day in practice, that he played the game with like such a passion and such a fire that it was kind of contagious, and it rubbed off on a lot of people. Even though he wasn't on the field, He would be the guy on scout team giving the offense the absolute best looks. He would be out there picking the ball even though they told him not to. He would be flying around acting like he just got us ready for every game, man. He was a big part of that team. I mean, when you see guys like that, when you're surrounded around a locker room full of guys like that, man, it creates a recipe for success. So I think that's why we were having such a good year and why we were doing so well.
Coming up after the break. After a big win,
what a finish! Perez, a 52.
The team goes out to celebrate, but the night would end in tragedy. A spilled drink at the bar leads to a deadly confrontation. Here's Nancy Hicks with Blindsided, the story of Mylan Hicks.
September 24th, 2016 started out like any other day for Mylan Hicks. He talked to his older sister Jasmine and her boys, who loved their uncle.
Yes, we FaceTimed every day and while he was in Calgary, so he could talk to the boys. Our last little conversation, he was actually on his way to practice and he had this big, bright smile on his face.
Mylan's mother also talked to her son before the big game.
But it was so short. The conversation was so short. But Mylan stayed on my mind that day.
The Stamps were on the verge of setting a new team record with another win.
We had one of the best records in CFL history and we was keeping it going, so it was a lot on the line.
Wow. And you were worried this game might not live up to its advanced billing. He's got enough on it. It's good. What a finish.
It was such a significant win that players decided to go out to a local nightclub to celebrate.
Everybody was just excited about the win. It was a lot of people in there. It was a packed club. You know, it was kind of like shoulder to shoulder, so wasn't a lot of room to maneuver and get around. So it was just naturally, you know, when you're in a crowded place, people are going to bump into each other. People are going to, rub elbows, whatever it may be.
An accidental brush and a spilled drink. That set the tone for the rest of the night.
It was just one of those situations where Renee somehow, bumped a guy, spilled his drink. He apologized for it, offered to buy him a new one. Guy was just getting all, kind of irate, like, yo, you spilled my drink, what's your problem? Like, who you think you are type of thing. And it was more like a, yo, dude, like, calm down. It's not really that deep. Like, I didn't mean to bump you. I'll buy you another one type of thing. I'll buy you or whoever else you want to drink. I don't know if they took it as like a disrespect thing, like, oh, you trying to show you got more money than me, or like, I don't know what it is, but it just really started over nothing, something that could have been easily, resolved.
Derek Dennis is referring to Rene Paredes, the Stamps kicker who got the winning field goal. Dennis said it seemed these guys were looking for trouble.
Guys decided to get a little rowdier, wanted to prove a point that they were, just as tough or manly or whatever you want to call it, testosterone, egos, whatever you want to call it, started flaring.
Next, there was an incident between the three guys and Dennis's roommate, former Stamps running back Jerome Messam.
My roommate, Messam, he was kind of like being there to be a protector, but he was egging it on in a sense, like yo, you're a little dude, you're not gonna do nothing, like stop acting like you tough. And I guess to prove a point, to show him that he wasn't tough, he took his hat off his head and he put it on his head. And then he was wearing his hat, like, if you want your hat back, come get it. And the dude was kind of like, oh, you disrespected me. And then that's when it started to build from there.
Dennis said there were three men involved. A taller one that wore a white shirt and a red vest. A second shorter guy who wore a white Armani Exchange hat, the one Dennis just mentioned. And a third guy.
I remember he had a white polo shirt on and a hat, like a strap back hat. He was just like running up like, yo, what y'all want to do? You want to go outside? You want to handle this? And it's like that's not what it is right now. And he just wouldn't let it go. He just kept like kind of running around frantically. So, in my head, where I'm from, when someone says that, that means he's trying to get to something that he feel like he can use. Because if he really wanted to fight, he would have done it right there on the spot. So for a lot of us who come from the U.S. and come from, you know, certain socioeconomic backgrounds where we grew up with that, we kind of understood, you know, what he was trying to do.
Dennis had a very bad feeling and thought the Stamps players should leave, but not everyone was ready to call it a night.
Naturally, I'm an offensive lineman, so I'm a protector. That's my mindset. I want to make sure everybody's good. I want to make sure everybody gets home at the end of the night.
Throughout the night, Mylan was messaging with NFL player Lawrence Thomas, his friend from back home.
What's crazy is the day that it happened, I had a game that Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and he had sent me like a Snapchat of just him just in the club, just having a good time, you know what I'm saying? Just letting him know they just won a game. And then I had woke up in the middle of that night, like around like 2:30 in the morning, and I seen like, okay, he having a nice time.
Meanwhile, Dennis was still feeling uneasy.
I actually saw Mylan when I was walking out the club, and I said, hey, you good? You need a ride home? Like, he like, yo, Double D, I'm straight. I don't need a ride, I'm good. I'm like, you sure? I got my car, you know, you can get in the car and get a ride. He like, nah, we good. He was with a couple other dudes. He like, you know, we good, we going, you know what I'm saying, do what we do. So I said, all right, I mean, y'all boys get home safe, you know what I'm saying, let me know if you need me, type of thing. And yeah, that was the last time I spoke to him. That was the last conversations I had with him before everything happened. I went to get the car, I pulled it up, and then as I was sitting in the car, I was taking my phone out to text the guys who I was with to let them know, like, yo, I'm here, like, where you at? I'm coming to get you. And as I was texting a couple of my teammates, that's when I heard, you know, everything happened.
This is dashcam video from a taxi who was passing through the parking lot at that exact moment. Derek Dennis was in his car when he heard a bottle break. He opened his door to see what was happening when he heard a gunshot.
I froze and I looked around and I'm like, who the hell is shooting in Calgary? Like, who has a gun? Like, it's like you said, in our mind, we're not thinking there's no type of crime. People are not walking around with guns. So I survey around me to see like where the gunshots was coming from. And then that's when I see Mylan running towards me. It happened so quick and I felt like I was moving in slow motion. As I go to get out the car to rush him, that's when I see him shoot 2 more shots. So I see him go bang. I look, I see Mylan stumbling by me, trying to get, so his car's parked on the side, it's my car, it's like a space between it. Mylan's trying to dart into that space to run. So I see him stumble. When I see him stumble, I watch him let off another shot, bang. And then that's when I saw Mylan fall, hit the ground, face down. So me, I'm like, oh, I gotta get to him. So I'm trying to rush him. After he let the second shot off, I see the guys come, they're like, yo, come on, get in the car. They grab him, they put him in the car, they speed off. So I start chasing the car, trying to like get a license plate, see whatever. I'm like trying to run after the car. So when I can't catch the car, I start screaming. I'm like, yo, they shot him, everybody's running around. So when I run back over, we like, yo, Mylan, get up. We all trying to, you know, make sure he good. I remember grabbing him and flipping him over, and we opened his vest, we opened his shirt, and I saw the bullet hole in his chest, and I just started like, I just freaked out. I was like, oh, like, in my head, I just started praying. I was like, please don't let him die, please don't let him die, please don't let him die.
Dennis has replayed the moment Mylan got shot over and over in his head.
It was like a scene out of a movie. Like, it was so surreal. Like, I have nightmares about that to this day. I remember just watching him on the ground, just like breathing, but his breathing was getting slower. And it was getting slower, and it was like you could tell like he was struggling to get his air. And we was all just like, yo, Mylan, hold on, like, you know, the ambulance is coming, like, screaming, call 911. Last time I saw Mylan was when they got him on the stretcher and they put him in the back of the ambulance, and that was the last time I ever saw him.
Next on Crime Beat, Mylan Hicks was rushed to hospital fighting for his life. Meanwhile, police were on the hunt for the gunman. It was a race against the clock to piece together what happened and find who was responsible. Here's Nancy Hicks with Blindsided, the story of Mylan Hicks.
There were multiple calls to 911. Police were quick to respond.
When we pulled up, EMS was still there, and they were still with the victim on the side of the building. And so we had officers that were trying to kind of control the scene, and we were trying to identify witnesses who'd kind of tell us what happened. Not really clear at the start what had really happened.
Constable Roche was tasked with transporting 2 Stamps players, including Derek Dennis, to police headquarters.
I just was like sitting there with my head down, just trying to process everything, trying to figure out like, where did we go wrong? Like, how did we even get to this point? He didn't deserve to be in that position. And as I'm sitting there with my head down, I remember holding my head like this, and something in me just said, pick your head up. Like, I don't know what it was. It was just something saying, yo, pick your head up and look out the window.
They're so upset, and they're just kind of going over like what a good guy Mylan was, and they can't believe that this happened. And then all of a sudden, so I'd gone maybe 4 blocks is all, and all of a sudden Derek is right behind me on the bench, and he kind of like leans forward. He has this like huge, powerful voice, and he's just like, that's the shooter. And he points and yells, and I see this group of men just kind of walking onto the sidewalk.
I saw them just walking down the street. And it caught me off guard at first. I'm like, there's no way these dudes are that stupid to just be walking down the street a block away from where they just shot somebody. And I remember seeing them, and I recognized them by their clothing, because it was dark. But I remember I saw the tall dude. He had a red vest on and a white shirt. He had red pants on. The vest was gone. He just had the white shirt and the red pants. I saw the other dude who had the Marnier Exchange hat that Messerman had took off. He had took his hat off, and he had like tossed it. He was still wearing the shirt that he was wearing in the club. And I seen the other guy who did it. He took his hat off, tossed it. He just had his shirt on. So in my head, I'm going, yo, I go to the officer, I go, that's them right there. He goes, that's who? I said, the guy who shot him is right there, like he's walking down the street. He said, are you sure? I said, I'm absolutely positive that it's them right there.
Roche and his partner got on their radio and requested backup.
And right away, 2 patrol cars got, like from the scene, got to 42nd. And so the 2 cars pull up like this, the doors are open, the overhead lights are on, and we see them challenge these individuals.
Stop right there, guys.
We see them putting their hands up, turning around. Police are taking them into custody. And as this has happened, Derek is like he's leaning kind of between the seats, and he's like, that guy there, he's the one that started the argument. And they're like, that guy, he's the shooter. And we're kind of getting like real-time information as they're taking them into custody. And I'd never like seen something like that before.
Bro, I'll never forget their faces ever again in life. Like, there's never a time where I'll never not recognize them. And I just, I told the cops, they arrested them, and then that's how they caught him.
Less than a half hour after the shooting, 3 people were identified by Derek Dennis and taken into custody for questioning. Just minutes later, Mylan Hicks died in hospital.
The fact that we got them in custody so quickly gives us another advantage when it comes to forensics. We've got all the same clothing, the identification. They're transported back to our headquarters. I've also contacted somebody from our crime scenes unit to come in, photograph, seize all the clothing, and swab our suspects down for gunshot residue.
Get in my vehicle.
Once a suspect's been arrested, police have 24 hours to either proceed with charges or let them go. Investigators focused on finding any surveillance video that may have captured the shooting. There was a camera at the front of the bar.
The main camera right outside the front doors, which is where this incident took place, those ones weren't working. That would have been a critical piece of evidence that would have been outstanding for court, but we have pieces of video that show the suspects and the players, everybody that was there throughout the night, but that critical piece was missing. One of the cabs we weren't even aware was there. It was, thankfully they contacted us and said, I might have something that you guys need. In analyzing that video, we actually catch a glimpse of the suspect running with what clearly looks like a handgun in his hand back to the vehicle pulling right in front of the cab and then leaving the scene of the murder.
Patrol officers found a vehicle that matched the description of the one the suspects fled the scene in. Investigators scoured the area for evidence.
I ended up taking a number of different routes. I did walk the area a couple of different times. The vehicle was parked, would have been parked, right next to an alley near Stanley Place. I could see that there was footprints in the mud that walked towards McLeod Trail. I then, to take myself out of contaminating any evidence, started walking on the grass.
The detective checked bins in that alley in case any evidence had been discarded.
One of them, which was a recycling bin, I flipped open, and the very top was a lighting box for a light fixture. So I jostled the box just with my finger, because you don't want to touch it too much in case it is evidence. I jostled it with my finger and I could feel the weight within the box. I kind of took my light, looked down at an angle, and sure enough, I can see the ribbing on what I would consider the slide of the gun.
That gun was sent away for analysis to our firearms experts. They did the testing and determined that that was an exact match for the rounds that were located at the scene, the casings that were found at the scene, and the weapon used in the murder.
Coming up, who were the three suspects? And why did the gunman resort to such extreme violence? Growing up in Detroit, Mylan's family never worried he would be shot while in Canada, and were shocked by the news of his death. Here's Nancy Hicks with Blindsided, the story of Mylan Hicks.
The primary suspect was 19-year-old Nelson Lugela.
Once the investigation unfolded and we ultimately found out who he really was, we knew he was well known to the Calgary police.
Lugela faced several charges in 2016 prior to the shooting. All were either stayed or withdrawn. Derek Dennis saw the shooting happen right in front of him. Police said his description of the gunman matched Lugela. The other two men questioned by police also matched Dennis's witness account.
A young man by the name of Darwin Concepcion, I think he was only 18 at the time. He was previous acquaintances with Mr. Lugela and a third individual by the name of Mr. Mohammed. He knew them from school. That summer he had got reacquainted with the three of them, and they were hanging out that night looking for a place to party, and they eventually ended up in the Marquee Lounge.
Darwin Concepcion was the only one to cooperate with police that night. His hat was the one taken by a Stamps player in the bar earlier that night.
Mr. Concepcion then, after giving a very lengthy recorded statement to the police, while he's still in custody, participated in somewhat of a recreation of what occurred immediately after that shooting.
Investigators said his version of events matched witness accounts. Police also showed Derek Dennis a photo lineup. He picked out Nelson Lugela and told investigators that was the man who shot his teammate.
I just remember just, being in the police station all night and just them asking me 1,000,001 questions, and I'm answering the questions, but I'm asking them one solid question and they just refused to answer it, and it was, is he okay? Like, is he alive? Is he okay? I mean, I think it was like right at the end, right before I left, they finally told me like, yeah, man, when I was in the interrogation room, just kind of giving them everything, and they kind of just was like, yeah, your friend didn't make it, and I just remember breaking down, like just crying, like.
Lugela was charged with the second-degree murder of Mylan Hicks. The other 2 men were released. As the homicide investigation continued in Calgary, miles away in Detroit, Mylan's mother had no idea her son was already gone.
It was the wee hours of the morning. I managed to get to sleep, and then I got a text message from a friend, and she said through the text, she says, "Do you need me to go to your house?" And so I looked at the text and I rolled back over. But when I rolled back over, it's just a little nudge on me to call her. She said Mylan had been hurt and then later passed. And I said, "Are you sure you're talking about the right guy?" I said, "Mylan's not even in Detroit." And she said, "Yeah, it's on the news, Renee." But at the same time she was saying it was on the news, my husband's phone was ringing and the people were informing him. But the government from Canada had already got in touch with the government here, unbeknownst to me, and they had already been out to my house, knocked on the door and told his sister, my daughter, and they were preparing how they could tell me. I didn't believe it. Sometimes I still don't, but I know it's true. But yeah, it took me by surprise. Because again, Mylan wasn't here. If something was gonna happen, really, crime-wise, I just said, it's our streets, But the devil is everywhere.
Lawrence Thomas fell asleep soon after he got the photo of Mylan at the club. That was his last message. He woke up to a call from his old high school coach.
He was crying, and like my heart just dropped. Like, hold on, what's going on? Like, what's going on? And he had said like Mylan just been killed, and I'm like, ain't no way. I just seen, like, I just woke up out my sleep a couple hours ago and seen that he sent me a Snapchat, and I'm saying like everything is fine. And he was like, no, that's when it happened. Like, it happened like after the club. So once he told me that, like, I hung the phone up. I believe I searched like on Twitter, like his name, like Mylan Hicks, and it said like Mylan Hicks in a nightclub shooting in Calgary. So it was like I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. It was like a nightmare. Like I got to go sit here and play a whole football game, and I just lost my brother. I can't even imagine what Moms was going through at the time.
I came immediately. I think it took 2 days. They expedited my passport, and I was able to get there, and I was met at the airport by, I guess, someone from the team, as well as a barrage of reporters. And they didn't know Mylan at that time, other than just being a stamp player. Then they began to dig a little deeper into his history, found out the outstanding, top-ranked young man he was, and I believe that's when it began to hit others, strangers. Because everywhere we walked, I had people just reaching out to me there on the streets of a different country, crying out for Mylan Hicks.
The Stamps were reeling.
To a degree, I'm a father figure because I'm an old man on the team, so I lost a son today.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of dedicated the rest of the season to Mylan, man. We just wanted to make him proud. We knew how much he wanted to win, how much, he cared about the game.
You want to be sad for the loss, but one thing we will do is celebrate his life.
1 week after Mylan was killed, Stamps coach Dave Dickinson spoke to players in the locker room before their first game back.
And guys, for Mylan, hit the on button. I heard you guys say it. He had an on button. Go hit the on button, and it's game time. Family on 3. 1, 2, 3. Family.
Next on Crime Beat. Detailed eyewitness accounts would be critical for the prosecution as the trial gets underway. A mother comes face to face with her son's accused killer during the trial. Here now is Nancy Hicks with a conclusion of Blindsided, the story of Mylan Hicks.
In December of 2018, Nelson Lugela stood trial for the second-degree murder of Mylan Hicks.
There were 2 shots. One of them hit Mr. Hicks mortally. It was at the front, somewhat at the front of his torso, but as he was running away, he was turning around, trying to see his pursuer, and presumably as he's turning around, as he's running away, that's when the shot hits him. Mr. Hicks falls in the parking lot and ultimately dies in a hospital.
Derek Dennis was a key witness for the prosecution.
Trying to be up there on the stand and just be strong, and I let my emotions get the best of me, and it was kind of hard to just recant all the details and just having to relive that moment of watching Mylan kind of breathing his last breaths.
Mr. Dennis clearly had an eye for detail. He described the gun, which ultimately was discovered. He accurately described what all 3 looked like in terms of their apparent ethnicity, the darkness of their skin, their relative heights to each other, what they were all wearing. All of that was bang on. A video inside the bar at the entrance area as the patrons come in and leave, that showed in pretty impressive detail the accused, Mr. Concepcion, Mr. Mohammed, enter the bar, and the 3 of them leave the bar. They were clearly identifiable on that videotape. Through the dash cam videos of these taxi cabs, you could, number 1, hear the shooting, you could hear the shots, there were 2 of them, and you could also see the immediate aftermath. So you see Mr. Concepcion move to the north from the front of the building towards Mr. Lugela, beckon him, as seen by Mr. Dennis, come on, let's go. And then the 2 of them leave in a hurry and get into Mr. Concepcion's motor vehicle. The footage was somewhat grainy, so it wasn't crystal clear, but it was certainly shaped like a gun in his hand. And the one video still, which was marked into evidence, you see the gun against Mr. Lugela's white shirt, silhouetted against his white shirt. And really there wasn't much doubt that that was a gun that he was holding.
Darwin Concepcion also testified against his friend Lugela.
He didn't see the shooting, but he certainly heard it and was in the driver's seat of his motor vehicle when Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Lugela came back in an awful hurry and told him to leave. He said that the music was blasting, that his 2 companions were telling him to leave in a hurry, so he did. He took off, went a little ways north on McLeod Trail, and then immediately turned west. And it was at that point in time, as he was entering the Park Hill area of Calgary, that he noticed that Mr. Lugela was handling this gun. He had this gun in his hand. And Mr. Lugela said words to the effect of, "I shot 2, I don't think he's going to make it." Mr. Concepcion was somewhat freaked out at this point in time. He parked his vehicle. The 3 of them, I think, were panicking. They left the vehicle with Mr. Mohammed's red vest still within the vehicle, with Mr. Concepcion's hat still in the vehicle, and made their way through a back alley, at which point Mr. Concepcion says he saw Mr. Lugela dispose of the gun in a blue recycle bin. That gun was subsequently recovered by the police. They then made their way down sort of a back rickety area of stairs back onto McLeod Trail. And as they were going along McLeod Trail, that's when Mr. Dennis spied them as he was being transported to give a statement. And it was then that Mr. Dennis very excitedly stated, "That's the shooter," pointing at Mr. Lugela.
Mylan's mother attended the court proceedings.
I recall running out a couple of times, running out in anger, running out in pain. And so I really had to pray hard. I carried my Bible. I asked the Lord to help me with that, because you hurt my baby.
Lugela was found guilty of second-degree murder.
This case was successfully prosecuted mainly as a result of the very thorough investigation conducted by the Calgary Police Service and the really solid witnesses, in particular Mr. Dennis.
At the sentencing hearing, Mylan's mother read a victim impact statement in court.
I conveyed that to the courts and the killer, that this was senseless. What was the odds that my son would come to Canada and run into the devil himself? I always ask that question, that he would just go meet Lucifer in the flesh.
Nelson Lugela was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 18 years. The events of that fateful night replay over and over for Mylan's mother.
Mylan has walked the streets of Detroit for years and never had a fiery dart thrown at him to the point where it cost him his life. I think he let his guard down somewhat because he was in Canada and every perception was that it was safe, that you don't have to actually look over your shoulders. You could go and just wander and no one's gonna bother you, you know? Your money was gonna stay in your pocket. You could let your fists unclench because you were pretty much safe, and it was just a facade.
Every day, Mylan is missed and remembered.
My home is littered with Mylan's pictures all throughout. I come in every morning, and after I thank God for waking me up, I come in and I salute my son. I do, I salute him every morning. I says, "Good morning, Bubs." I call him Bubs. "Good morning, Bubs," and I go by my day. And then sometimes there's just this real still quietness that I feel him the most. And I'll toss and I'll turn sometimes because I said, "You trying to tell me something? Is this something you want me to know?" Those are the hardest days. But I know my son loved me. I'm lonely. Mylan was my friend. I wrestle every day, not a day passes. I wrestle every day. But again, I got a lot of faith, so it helps aid me. I just know this was a major loss, not just to me, but to family and to friends, to the community, to even the football league. Mylan just was an outstanding character, and I'm not saying this as it relates to being biased. I'm telling you what God loves, the truth. He just was an outstanding person.
Nelson Lugela filed an appeal, but Alberta's top court upheld the conviction. The 2015-2016 season was supposed to be a historic one for the Stampeders. Instead, it was memorable for all the wrong reasons. On top of it all, they didn't win the Grey Cup that year. In 2018, the Stampeders finally won, and many of the players dedicated the win to Mylan. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
To learn more about this case, subscribe and listen to my Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And for previous episodes of Crime Beat TV, check out our YouTube page or download the Global Go app to watch on your phone.